This narrow strip of water, just 21 miles wide at its tightest point, is the most important waterway on the entire planet. Through it flows nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply, the fuel that keeps the global economy running, and right now, one nation has its finger on the trigger to shut it all down. So, what would actually happen if they pulled it? This is the story of the military, economic, and political chain reaction that would be set off if the Strait of Hormuz were ever closed. A full-blown blockade wouldn't just be an energy crisis, it would be a shock to the system, shattering supply chains and causing severe economic pain around the world. The Strait of Hormuz is the only way ships can get from the Persian Gulf out into the open ocean. To the north you have Iran, to the south Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Every single day about 20 million barrels of oil and other petroleum products get loaded onto supertankers and squeezed through these crowded waters. That's more than a quarter of all oil that travels by sea, anywhere in the world. On top of that, about a fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, mostly from Qatar, makes the exact same trip. This isn't just a number. It's the energy that powers the world's biggest industrial giants, especially in Asia. An incredible 84% of all the oil and gas that leaves the strait is headed to Asian markets, powering the economies of China, India, Japan, and South Korea. China alone needs more than 5.4 million barrels a day from Hormuz, and India relies on it for over 2 million. This geography creates a serious vulnerability, and one nation, Iran, has built its entire military strategy around it. Iran's naval forces, especially its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, aren't built to fight the US Navy head-to-head. Instead, they're armed with an arsenal that's perfect for something called anti-access/area denial. We're talking about thousands of naval mines, swarms of fast attack boats and small submarines, and a powerful network of coastal anti-ship missiles that can blanket the entire strait. Now this threat is kept in check by a huge international military presence. The US Fifth Fleet is based right next door in Bahrain, and at any given moment, American, British and other Allied warships are patrolling these waters. Their main job ensuring freedom of navigation. And as tensions have risen recently, the US has beefed up its forces, making sure powerful aircraft carrier strike groups are nearby to send a clear message. So you have this incredibly tense standoff. On one side, a nation with the power to light the fuse. On the other, a global superpower that has sworn to stop them. The real question is, what happens if that standoff finally breaks? Alright, let's play this out. The first domino falls. Iran, maybe in retaliation for something or as a desperate political move, decides to make a move. A full official blockade is actually the least likely thing to happen. First, under international law, you can't just close an international strait like Hormuz. More importantly, a total closure would be an act of economic suicide for Iran. Its own economy desperately needs the exports that go through that very same waterway, so instead Iran would almost certainly use what are called gray zone tactics. Actions designed to cause chaos while giving them just enough room to deny they're responsible. This could mean secretly dropping some of their thousands of naval mines from small submarines. Just the rumor of mines in the water could be enough to stop all commercial shipping for days. They could use their fast attack boats to harass and seize commercial tankers, which they've done before. Or they could launch drone and missile strikes and blame it on one of their regional allies to confuse the situation. The goal isn't to sink every ship. It's to make sailing through the strait so dangerous that shipping and insurance companies simply refuse to go there. Insurance costs for war risk would explode overnight, creating a blockade in practice without Iran ever having to fire on a military ship. The world wouldn't just sit back and watch. The United States has been crystal clear. Any attempt to close the strait is a red line. Allied navies already in the area would immediately switch to a war footing. Their mission would be twofold. First, protect and escort commercial ships in convoys, just like in the tanker war of the 1980s. And second, begin the incredibly dangerous and slow work of clearing mines and taking out the missile and boat threats along the Iranian coast. Most analysts think that in a direct fight, Iran's navy would be wiped out in a matter of hours or days, but by then, the damage would already be done. The first domino, military escalation, would be down, and the next one would already be wobbling. The second that traffic in the Strait of Hormuz is seriously threatened, the global economy gets thrown into chaos. The very first thing to happen would be a spike in the price of oil. Global energy markets run on fear, and even the threat of a closure can send prices soaring. A real lasting disruption would be a catastrophe. Financial models from major institutions are grim. Some analysts believe an initial price spike could send Brent crude oil shooting toward $100 or even $150 a barrel. Even the more conservative estimates see a sharp, painful price increase that would last for months. And this isn't just a problem for Wall Street, the effects would ripple through the entire global economy. Higher oil prices mean higher gas prices for you and me, higher shipping costs for every single product in the store, and bigger energy bills for families and businesses. That would kick off a wave of inflation all over the world. Central banks, already struggling to keep inflation in check, would have to jack up interest rates, which would strangle economic growth. For the countries that depend most on Hormuz oil, the situation would be desperate. Asian economies would face an incredible challenge. With over 80% of the strait's oil headed their way, countries like South Korea and Japan would be hit with both shortages and crippling prices. This could easily push their economies into a deep recession. What about everyone else? Europe is less directly reliant, getting more oil from the US and Norway, but it would still suffer from skyrocketing global prices. The United States itself imports a pretty small amount of its oil through Hormuz, only about 7% of its total oil imports. But that doesn't make the US immune to a global price shock. When the price of oil goes up everywhere, it goes up in America too. In all this chaos, there might be a few winners. Russia could find Asian countries knocking on its door, desperate for another supplier. US shale producers could ramp up exports. But the world has very little spare production capacity. Big producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE do have pipelines that go around the strait. But they can only carry a fraction of what flows through the sea. It wouldn't be nearly enough. Governments would absolutely release their strategic petroleum reserves to try and calm things down. But that's a temporary fix. the economic domino would have crashed, sending the world spiraling toward a global recession. With the global economy in a freefall, the political fallout would be immediate. You can bet on an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. The diplomatic pressure on Iran would be intense, and it would come from every direction. Crucially, that pressure wouldn't just be from the West. Iran's most important partner, China, would be in a terrible spot. China is the biggest buyer of oil that passes through Hormuz, and it also buys most of Iran's own oil exports. A blockade would wreck the Chinese economy and undermine Beijing's attempts to cast itself as a peacemaker in the Middle East. China would have no choice but to lean on Tehran hard to back down. The crisis would also shake up the entire region. The Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait and Qatar, would see their own economic lifelines cut. That would push them into an even closer security alliance with the United States and other Western powers, all united by the need to get the strait back open. For the United States, the crisis would present some impossible choices. A full military intervention could easily escalate into a much bigger war across the Middle East. But to try and stabilize oil markets, Washington might have to make politically painful decisions, like lifting sanctions on other oil-producing countries. The Iranian regime itself would face the most dangerous political consequences. While hardliners might cheer a blockade as a show of strength, it would also risk total economic collapse and leave Iran completely isolated. By alienating its few remaining partners and destroying its own main source of income, the regime could threaten its own survival. This is the main reason why, for decades, closing the Strait of Hormuz has been a threat but never a reality. It's the ultimate gamble, but one that would almost certainly backfire spectacularly. So you have these three dominoes: military, economic, and political, a chain reaction that could lead to a global disaster. A blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is a scenario with no real winners. Iran might have the military tools to disrupt this critical waterway, but doing so would invite a massive military response and risk its own economic and political destruction. The global economy, and especially the industrial powerhouses of Asia, would be thrown into an energy crisis that would almost certainly trigger a worldwide recession. The political fallout would redraw alliances and could ignite a much wider, more brutal conflict in the Middle East. The truth is that the Strait of Hormuz is a weapon of mutually assured economic destruction. That's why its closure is considered a low-probability, high-impact event. The threat itself is the real weapon. But in a region this volatile, you have to ask, how long can this fragile balance really hold? What happens when a miscalculation, an accident, or just an act of pure desperation finally pushes that first domino? If you want to understand the geopolitical forces that shape our world, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for more analysis like this. Let us know in the comments, what do you think is the most dangerous consequence of a Hormuz blockade? Thanks for watching.